So I want to go ahead and explain two more windows in this navigation lesson before we take a quick break and then continue to move on. Let's go ahead and create something from our objects menu. I'm going to grab a figure. By the way, I didn't show you the figure, but I also think this one's pretty sweet because you can just, that's a person. I mean, like one of those maybe sketch drawing pad guys that you would sketch in art class. But anyway, your objects menu is right here. I'm going to create a bunch of things so you just see. He's wearing a dress, boxy dress. Or it could have been she. Watch, now it's a she. She's got a skirt. Isn't that? Okay, I'm getting distracted way too easy, huh? But that's pretty funny. I'm just creating a bunch of cubes and shapes to randomly show you what I'm doing here. Hey, look, it's like a ballerina. Anyway, I've got these 5 objects here, and I'm going to run through how the objects manager here works. You can see there's a list of different things. You can scroll down with your up and down arrows, so down and up. And we've got something here, all these icons. I'll explain them in a little bit. But first I want to show you, if you've ever used a program like After Effects or Motion or Photoshop, there's layers. And so you have the divisions of what's on top and the hierarchy. And so obviously the tube, it doesn't matter what's on top now because they're all their own thing. I mean, it doesn't make a difference in seeing them. But we can do something called parenting. And so you can create a child and parent relationship where something has to obey the other. For example, if I want, let's make this human, the mom, let's make her a mom. She's the parent. No pun intended. And let's go ahead and have the cube, this thing right here, be the kid. So we're going to drag it, and notice the arrow options that happens. If it's down, that's actually going to create that parent relationship. If it's just a regular arrow, it's not going to do anything. So let's do the down arrow. We drug it on there, or dragged it on there. And it's now, if I move this parent, it's moving with it. So if I were to animate, it would have the same keyframes. So that's a very helpful tool. We can also do it with other things. Let's go ahead and create the cone, a parent of the tube, the down arrow. So bam, if I move it up, which I'm moving the cone now, so obviously you're like, why isn't it moving? Because that's the child. It has to obey the parent. So if I move this, now both of them will move correspondingly. So child-parent relationships are very important. You might know it if you've done other programs like After Effects or whatnot. Now, next to them, we've got these icons here. I'm going to go over this, adding a new layer in the next lesson. But first, I want to point out, I think I talked about it in the first lesson, the option to hide in render. And to create that green dot right there for the tube, which is this object right here. So I'm going to do some unparenting, grab the cone, regular side arrow, unparent it. Now I'm going to click this button right here. So this top button, when it's red, it turns it invisible during the actual editor. But during render, it'll be visible. I can turn that on and off. But if I click the bottom one, that turns it red. That means it's going to be invisible during the render, but visible in the preview. So now it's going to be gone. And if I do both of them, you'll see it's invisible in both the editor and in the render when I click here. You can also just turn those on and off by using the check mark. So if I do that, it works as if both of them are turned off on the red. You can also do that down here in your attributes menu. And to talk about a little bit about this window, it's the other one I wanted to talk about here. The attributes is basically if you've used an inspector in Motion. I know a lot of you come from Motion. So this is where your detailed little adjustments are. Sometimes you've got more than these 5 tabs. If I drag down something like sunlight, it's got a ton of different tabs to work and adjust in here. I'm going to delete that sun because everything gets dark. But for the figure, let's go to the figure. I've got different coordinates here. In this tab, that's a huge part of Cinema 4D or any 3D modeling is the coordinates. We'll talk about that later. Object properties, you can change the height of the person. You can make them a giant, make them a tiny little miniature. Segments, that shows the segments, the quality of it. Most of this you can figure out, name here. Let's name the figure Zach, and it'll update here in the Objects Manager, as you saw. And we can also go to the same buttons that I was just showing you, these little dots right here. Those are the same things in just tab form. So I can turn it off in the render and turn it off in the editor, just like that. Oh, also notice how when I did the parent thing, notice how Zach, the figure, is parented to the cube. Both of them turned off when I did that. So because it's parented, if I turn off the parent, drag it down to create its own, it'll pop back to normal. So that's pretty cool. Jumping back up to the objects manager, we've got these icons here, and later you'll see how these they are called tags right here, how they're of value. Let's turn on Zach, and I'm going to show you something, just kind of how a tag works. There's a MoGraph tag. I'm going to turn on rigid body. I'm also going to turn this on so I can see. And let's scale up. I don't mean to do a tutorial here. Well, that's ironic. You're watching a tutorial. Let's scale it up. You'll learn a little bit here. So bam, the human is scaled up. I've got that tag called rigid body, which is this icon here. And basically a tag is kind of thing specific, like a task. That's the icon for that. There's so many tags. If I select Zach and we go to tags, we can apply different things. I'll talk about this later, but basically they're little tasks that help you do things. If you watch a tutorial on my channel called Throwsy Exploding Box Tutorial, you'll see a little bit how I use the MoGraph tag in the rigid body to use a plugin called Throwsy. I don't want to show you now, but if you have questions, you want to see it, it's pretty cool. I think that's enough. We talked about the objects manager. We talked about the attributes page, and I personally like to jump into actual tutorials, and that's how I learn the most, so that's how I want to teach you guys. This is kind of just an overview to figure out the layout, but other than that, we'll figure out the rest of it as we go through the training.